Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to this session. This session follows on actually very nicely from everything we've heard this afternoon already, from the keynote speech from adolescents, from Jenny, and for the personality types that we had earlier from me, and Chiro's parenting session just before lunch. So this, I think, is a big theme, a big concern that a lot of us have in our lives, particularly with regards to young people and technology. So we have given it this kind of slant, nurturing a digitally wise generation together. We'll go into what that means, being digitally wise, and what it means by doing that together, how we can do it. In terms of the presentation, we're going to break down into these three areas. Just moving on the PowerPoint. These three areas. So first of all, it's looking at the world of the digital native, looking at the technological panorama as we see it around us. Then we'll look a little bit at the impact of screen time on adolescent brains, and then we'll look at the practicalities of what we can do together. So really what we are doing in this session is just taking a moment to stop and to think, which is very much the motto of We See Education, is to stop and wonder about what we are engaging in, what we have around us, and what we are trying to do. And I think technology is, as we said before, is a concern. It can be a very, very big concern. We have a culture of technology, but it's so new in many ways, and there are so many complications that arise within it that sometimes we don't really know what's happening. We are building this culture of technology around us. Earlier, we mentioned the idea of family culture and family legacy, that we have cultures and legacies within our families that are to do with everything, with interacting with different people, with everything, but particularly with technology. We'll look at that a little bit later on. Our young people are growing up in this technological atmosphere. And I think our biggest challenge that we're looking at today is not necessarily the technology itself. And I know that at the forefront of many of our minds, we tend to view things quite fearfully, quite negatively, and in a sense, rightfully so. We are the responsible adults in the lives of our young people, and we have concerns. Earlier, I think there was a talk from Mr. Nelson about being safe online, and very practical kind of advice arising around that. What we are going to do is look at the culture broadly, and then what we can do within it. I am a very positive advocate for technology. I have social media accounts. Every now and again, I dabble lightly in gaming. I'm a very positive advocate for technology generally, but I think the danger is not the technology, it is our culture of passivity, which is growing up within it, our sort of unconscious passivity, where all of this technology is swirling around us, social media, increased screen time, especially among young people, and especially young people who are, as we call them, digital natives. They are growing up unconsciously. They are growing up with it so much in their lives that they're not even conscious that they're there. And this gives rise to lots of very interesting things. And I think, first of all, if we move on, first of all, it's the perspective that the digital natives have, as opposed to the perspectives that we as digital immigrants have. So these are two kind of sweeping generalizing terms that sociologists and psychologists have come up with, which are helpful to kind of get to grips with it. So digital natives are the younger generation, the teenagers of today and younger, who specifically have not known life pre-smartphone, mass online gaming, screen time as we see them engaged in it today. They are literally native to the world of digital things, the internet of things, the internet generally. They can't imagine what it's like not to have Wi-Fi. Whereas for the rest of us, we remember what life was like before the internet. We remember what life was like before there was a computer or a TV even in every household. And what I want to say about that particularly is that there is a divide here in technology, but the divide is not just about age. I think we look at it in terms of age, we look at it in terms of a generation gap, but actually what we are talking about here is a divide in perception as well. So we gave, as Pablo said earlier, we gave a session to the year 7s and 8s just this week, actually, on technology. And we gave them a sort of a survey to take so that we could see what they were doing. If we could click once. So we asked them, which social media or messaging platforms do you think you spend the most time on? And this is their response. This is 26 responses. We had more later on, but no one uses Facebook, as you could probably realize, because that is an adult social media platform. No cool kid uses Facebook anymore. Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, WhatsApp is an obvious one there. And if you click again, we asked them what they spent most of their screen time on, and that was overwhelmingly gaming. Now, I am going to make a point here. This was an audience entirely of boys, and this is exactly what I would have expected. With girls, I suspect the social media, which here is 7.7% of the respondents, would probably be the other way around. Social media would be much heavier for girls, but gaming is quite dominantly a boy thing at the moment. So when we've sent a sort of pre-workshop survey to those of you in this workshop today as well, and the differences in why we use our technology and what we use it for is astounding. And it goes back, if we could click back to the original slide, it kind of goes back to this idea. Can we click one more time back? So thank you very much. This is the thing. This is the technology divide between digital natives and digital immigrants. The reason why we use technology is wildly different. And I think we need to keep this at the forefront of our minds, because when we have discussions about technology in our household, about screen time, et cetera, we are actually, without knowing it, beginning that discussion, beginning that conversation, beginning our rule giving from two quite different standpoints. We knew technology as a tool. When we asked the students, what do you think your parents use their screens for, their phones for? It was overwhelmingly work-related. And in fact, in the survey that came back to us today, overwhelmingly work-related. Entertainment in terms of Netflix and watching things, but more about emails. It's more about Microsoft Office and things like that. So we have seen technology as it was originally intended, which was to be a tool. Now, seeing technology as a tool is a very different viewpoint to seeing technology as an entertainment, as a facilitator of entertainment. And on the right of the screen there, you can see this is overwhelmingly what our young people use technology for. This is maybe a basic thing to be saying, but I think it's worth having it in our minds that we are already beginning the discussion from different standpoints, and it's good to be aware of this. So when we say to our young people, why are you so addicted to your screen? What we might actually be saying is, why are you addicted to something that I am not addicted to? Why? Because I am using this as a tool. I know how to put this down because I've always used it as a tool, not as an entertainment, as a tool. We're going to go into the kind of the differences between this a little bit later on, but it's just interesting. I think it's just worth bearing in mind. If you click through a couple of times to the next slide. So the session, I thought would be interesting for you to know. The session that we did with the students on Wednesday, which covered a variety of points, but here, if you click through one more time, thank you. This is what the students' workshop covered. This is what we were talking about. We were looking at, what do you use technology for and what do your parents use technology for? So you can see the beginnings of a conversation that are mirroring in this workshop and in the workshop that they had, which is precisely the point of our educational program, to understand that we are looking at technology from very different standpoints sometimes, and it's just good to have that in the forefront of our minds. Can we click once? Thank you. So rational empathy, understanding that there are different viewpoints, different uses for the way that we see technology. And then we looked at, click one more time, the psychology behind social media algorithms and gaming algorithms. We went into the brain's reward system. I'm going to tell you more about that so that you know what the content is, and also it's hopefully going to guide our guidance of young people. But information and awareness, to have a very objective and self-aware view of why I use technology. So I think if we want to help our young people with this idea of self-mastery in technology in their own lives, they need to know what they are doing. They need to be aware of their own habits. And I think that that's true for anything. If you want to change anything, you have to know why you do it and what you are doing, what you're doing it for. And I think technology has to be completely a part of that. So we did some self-reflection exercises. They thought about how much time they spent on their phones, what they used it for, whether they had a smartphone, and we went into things like that. And if you click one more time, the last one was a focus on self-regulation and responsibility. So we did a little exercise. They have these worksheets, by the way. Those of you who have sons in year 7 and 8, they will have these. So it would be really interesting to ask them at home what they thought. So they did little exercises, little studies about how would I feel if you need to tell your mum or dad something important and you're nervous about having that conversation. You're in the car with them, but as usual, they've got their headphones on. How does it make you feel? Is it easy to have that conversation? Now, mums and dads, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have your headphones on in the car, but it might be something that your child might do. You might have been in the situation where you're wanting to have a conversation with them, but they have their AirPods in. Again, as digital natives, they very often don't realize that what they are doing is creating a barrier to immediate conversation. So the exercises that they did were exercises in empathy. They were exercises in realizing that my actions, digitally speaking, including all of the screens and devices in my life, might actually have an impact on other people. A big emphasis of the workshop was that people are more important than screens. So if you are with someone who is more important, they are. Not your screen, not the game that you're playing, not the music that you're listening to. So that's just for you to know. That's what has happened in the students' workshop. And they know that their parents are also having the same workshop from a slightly different angle. So it is to facilitate communication and conversation within your family, within your household. Okay, so a little bit more about the world of the digital native. These figures were taken from the Ofcom Media Attitudes and Trends report, which was taken from data over 2015 to 2019. Now, I should say that obviously the lockdown has affected a lot of this. A lot of things are changing within the pandemic, and the data does not reflect this, but I think it's very useful to look at trends. So here are some statistics on the screen. 86% of 8 to 11-year-olds own a smartphone, 97% of 12 to 15-year-olds own a smartphone. There's a real tipping point at the age of 9 or 10 where half of the 9 and 10-year-olds who were interviewed within the survey own a smartphone. They're not even in secondary school yet, but they have a smartphone because we see this like as a digital milestone. Their transition into secondary school includes having a smartphone. We'll look at that in a second. Upward trend in use of tablets and mobiles to go online, downward trend in use of desktop computers and laptops. Then we have some on-demand streaming data there. Now, I think what is most interesting with this data is not the data in itself. It is looking at what is happening within the lives of our young people, what they're growing up with. To me, what I see is, if there is an upward trend in use of tablets, mobiles, and the ownership of smartphones, those are individualistic devices. There is a downward trend in the use of desktop computers and laptops. Now, I think in Chiro's talk, he was saying about bedrooms, about keeping it as in inverted commas Spartan as possible. That very often, if you send as punishment, you send a child to their bedroom. If they have an entertainment system in their bedroom, if they have a TV, if they have their smartphone in the bedroom, I mean, that's paradise. That's not a punishment. That's even if they are the most extroverted of extroverted children. I mean, that's not a difficult punishment to take on board. Now, I think we might remember the time when in our family there was a computer that we shared, that we all used, that the TV was in a public shared area of the house. Certainly it was for me. We had one computer and we had to negotiate computer time. It was in the dining room and the screen was facing inwards towards the dining room. And what did that do? It taught us in a subconscious way that you are responsible for the way and the time in which you use this tool within our household, that it is okay to have this very helpful tool within our household, but it is not yours. It is not an individualistic thing that is just for you. So we see this change in trend. We are seeing a trend of individualistic technology. It's neutral. That is just a fact, and I think we need to bear it in mind as such. This is just how they are growing up. The next slide, another interesting set of data. 74% who own a mobile phone, 12 to 15-year-olds, are allowed to take it to bed with them, while 61% of tablet owners are allowed to do this also. The age group of tablet owners, by the way, is getting younger and younger and younger. There are 4-year-olds, according to the survey, who own tablets, their own tablet. 98% watch TV programs, films on any device for 11 hours, 48 minutes a week. 81% play games for 11 hours, 36 minutes a week. We did another question within that survey to the students to see how much time they spent on average per day on entertainment. So use of entertainment, screens for entertainment. And it ranged from half an hour to 5 hours. It's a big range. 5 hours is an awful lot of time. And it's reflected here in the data across the nation. This is the world of the digital native. They are getting an awful lot of access and ability to do things. But what we need to do is make sure that that is also balanced by an ability to self-regulate, an ability to see technology not just as entertainment, but to see it as tools and to use them as such. The idea of all of that kind of technology, surely it must have some kind of physiological impact. And this is also what we went over in the students' workshop. If we could click through to the next slide, there is an impact of all of this screen time and technology as entertainment that the students are now beginning to be aware of. And these are the kind of the main areas. If we could click again. There are actual physiological changes in the brain. There are effects that impact on sleep quality and on memory. And there is a particular thing that I will go through a bit more specifically on the psychology behind social media and gaming algorithms. Physiologically, changes in the brain. There are studies that have taken place very recently within the last 5 to 10 years. And if you want sort of data on that, then there's a wonderful documentary called Screenagers, which I think the Laurels hosted maybe 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, and it is available online. And there are clips available online. And in the handout that we have we sent around this handout for the technology session, we've also included links to videos on that. So I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but just to make the point that physiological changes are happening on the brain. Jenny Price was talking this morning, Dr. Jenny Price was talking about the fact that our adolescents' brains are still developing. And we know that's a basic fact, but what they can't be prepared for and what they possibly don't know about is that all of this onrush of technology as entertainment, all of this quick movement, this need to progress through levels in certain games, the constant scrolling on social media, all of that, our brains are not prepared for that massive intake of dopamine, which is released by our brain's reward system. Again, we'll talk about that in a second. And actually, for those young people who have actually become addicted to their social media, to gaming, their brain scans resemble the brain scans of drug addicts. And in a funny sense, we shouldn't be surprised because an addiction is an addiction. In the students' workshop, we looked at what addiction was, and I would really encourage you to get them to feed back to you about what they understood within the session. We tried not to make it too heavy because addiction is a diagnosable thing. We weren't using it lightly, but to get the main ideas across that an addiction is something that they need to be aware of. If you can't stop yourself from doing something that either you shouldn't be or will lead to a negative outcome, regardless of the important or good things that are immediately in front of you. Now, what might interest you is how aware your sons are of what addiction is. They know exactly what it is. They know that social media and gaming can lead them down that pathway. So they are aware of it. And I think it's good to kind of bring those into your family conversations as well. Sleep quality and memory. Now, the data that we looked at about the percentage of young people who are allowed to bring their phones to bed with them or their tablets to bed with them, I think this is a really normal thing. I think we all do it. I mean, every night my phone is charging by my bed. So I know I use it as my alarm. But I think for young people particularly, we have to be aware of this and we might have to help them with this. that the blue light that is emitted by screened devices like tablets, computers, and phones actually interrupts our body's natural sleep patterns. It can really disrupt it and suppresses the secretion of melatonin. And how that impacts it is important. It's not just the fact that they're up late scrolling on social media and therefore are just not getting enough sleep, but they are lacking the deep REM sleep, which is essential for processing, for storing information, and especially from that day, storing it into their long-term memory. So apart from the fact that teenagers, as we have addressed several times throughout several sessions, they need a healthy sleep diet. One of the ways in which we can help them with that is to get them to limit their screen time immediately before bed. It's difficult to do, but it's necessary. And again, the earlier we begin this habit, the easier it will be for them to kind of incorporate it into their normal everyday lives. Then the psychology behind social media, gaming algorithms. This is a big shift in culture, I think. If we could go to the next slide. This is just a basic visual summary of what our young people spend most time on. This is, let's not generalize, there are lots of young people who don't have a social media account, don't particularly enjoy gaming, or they use it for literally as a tool, and that's a great thing. But for the majority of the young people, this is basically the culture that they exist in. Social media and gaming. YouTube has been a key player in this. The world that our digital natives inhabit is visual, highly visual, very quick moving, very stimulating, and subtly reward conscious. So I think we see the impacts of this. We see them going around playing Pokemon Go on their phones. Do you remember when that happened? Pokemon Go was like a massive thing, and adults and children alike were completely addicted to it. Social media and gaming are just, it's just part of their everyday life. What we went through in the students' workshop, and I would encourage us to think about very carefully, if we could go to the next slide, and this is part of being informed and making informed choices, is that social media, the entertainment industry generally, so your streaming platforms, your Netflix, gaming, social, all of those things, they are an industry that are created exactly to be addictive. Microsoft Word was not created to be addictive because it was created as a tool. A tool, it is just a tool. I used Microsoft PowerPoint, a tool, in order to create this workshop today. Tools do not demand of us. They do sometimes if we're using them. If we are addicted in our own way to Microsoft PowerPoint, then it's a slightly different matter. But they were created in order to assist. These things that our young people are filling their digital world with were created not to assist, but to be addicted to. It is a whole industry that is built upon that. Now, at this point, I would like to recommend, very strongly recommend, watching the Social Dilemma documentary on Netflix if you haven't already. It's in our handout. It is absolutely mind-blowing. It's led by heads and innovators within the field of social media technology gaming. The inventor of the infinite scroll function on, when you on Facebook, you just pull down the screen and you get that little loading button, and you know that when it comes back, it's going to be refreshed with new stuff. Or now if you browse Google Images, you don't have to click next page anymore. It just appears. There's an infinite feed. There's an infinite scroll. So the inventor of that algorithm is speaking about it. People involved in Pinterest and Gmail, the early days of Facebook, the person who instigated the like button on Facebook, they are all speaking on this documentary about the ethics of the algorithms behind this industry. And all of them say exactly the same thing, that it is an industry that is created to be addictive. We went over this in the students' workshop. So again, it's really important to bring up those conversations at home. Ask them what they know, ask them what they've discovered. And watch that documentary is really worth it. I think it's a point that many of the Silicon Valley hotshots, the people who've invented all of these things, don't allow smartphones in their own home. They invented it, and they do not allow their children access to smartphones and screens. Now, whether that method is the best way of going about it, we're going to look at that in a second. But again, it's just important to bear this in mind. We also talked about, if we go to the next slide, we also talked about how the entertainment technology in general has been built to hijack your brain's reward system without you knowing. So we went into, if we click through 3 times, please, we went through these kind of familiar visual cues that we all know. And the moment on the left there, that little notification icon, the moment we put that up, there was an immediate furore in the classroom. And when we asked them why, they said, because it means there's a message for me. The next one is a screenshot from Fortnite. I did not know this, I had to Google it. But again, immediately I put it on the screen and the boys knew exactly what that was. And you can just look at it. You look at it and you can see why it would be addictive, because it's chapter 2. I asked them how many chapters there were. And honestly, I was astonished. There were so many. There was level 20 there. And I asked them how many levels. And they said there's an infinite number of levels. And there is like a punch card. So you gain points, you gain lives as you go along. I don't know. But you can see how this, digitally speaking, is going to be completely addictive, because you are working towards gaining things. Now, the reason why this is built to hijack our brain's reward system is because, first of all, we have a reward system, and it's a really good thing in us. Our reward system tells us when something is good, and therefore we can build it into a habit. We want to do it again. But the problem is the technology and entertainment, social media industry hijacks, it says, you know, I'm going to build something that has rewards built into it. So every time you gain something, you feel great about yourself. So you want to keep gaining and feeling great about yourself, and gaining and feeling great about yourself. Now, for a developing adolescent's brain, this is like having a diet that is purely made of cake, because it's not real. It's actually not real. It gives you a rush of dopamine. You feel excited. It's so exciting. But then what happens to the real world? What happens of your perceptions of good things that you feel good about in the real world? If you have a diet that is made completely of cake, I asked the boys this question and they told me you would shrivel up and die. I quote verbatim there. They said, you know, your body's basically just going to shut down. So we were drawing that obvious parallel between your digital diet, your mind diet, your brain diet, and your physical diet. They could see it physically. That was an obvious thing for you. If you eat cake all the time, you're not only going to get sick of cake, but your body is not going to thank you. But also, they're now beginning to make the links between that and their brain diet. That these devices, these games and entertainment things that are built to kind of get you all hyped up on digital sugar, to keep you earning and being entertained. You can't fill your brain with just that. It is like just surviving on cake. For the sugar lovers among us, I know it doesn't sound that bad, but I think we get the lesson. So we've gone over that in that session, and it's good for us to know. If we know that that's what social media is built for, that games, that's what they are built for, we are going in armed, at least. We know. Now, one thing also that I think is important with all of this is that so far, hopefully, it hasn't been a negatively focused thing. I said I was an advocate of technology in the beginning. We have to be really aware that, first of all, technology is here to stay. You know, the internet exists and we exist, and our digital natives are very differently viewing generation perhaps than we are, but they also have these massive powers for good. They have a real capacity to use this really well if we're able to guide them in that direction. So just a few ideas, really, positives of a technologically able generation. They're connected and aware. They're aware of sensitive social issues, a strong sense of online community, flexible and creative. I mean, how many times have you had an issue at home with your technology and one of your children is able to solve it? It's amazing, really. It is really very, very amazing. They are still able to see technology as tools. And I think this is one of the main points, I think, of what we can do going forward. We have to help to reframe technology for them as tools, not just pure entertainment. Because that's a 100% cake diet, and they can't have that, and they know they can't. We have to help them to see tech as tools and to frame this all positively. This is something I think that is very, very important. The positive framing of technology in their lives as well as in our lives. We cannot parent and teach effectively from a standpoint of fear and limitation. It doesn't work. And I think if we think about our own teenagehoods, our childhoods, and we think of the thing that you debated with your parents over, you know, being allowed to be out later, being allowed to watch TV on a weekday. I don't know. I think for all of us, it would have been different. But remember that moment. Remember what you felt when you were trying to get your parent to see your perspective of why you wanted to do this thing. Possibly your parent's word was authoritarian and that was it, the end. And I think with this enormous entry of something that is much bigger or more powerful than any of us have experienced in our lifetime, I think we need to adjust our parenting and our teaching accordingly. We have to really focus on doing things together, and we need to reframe everything positively and as positively and as powerfully as possible. So this is why we have called this Nurturing a Digitally Wise Generation. If we could click through to the next slide. What do we mean by helping this generation to be digitally wise? Well, just this, being informed and therefore making informed choices. So the reason why in the student session we went through all of these things about the psychology behind the algorithms, the brain's reward system, is precisely to help them to be informed. It's not going to make sense for them if we keep saying to them, put down your phone, but stop being on social media. You shouldn't have a social media account. It's a very negative way of addressing an issue. And very naturally, they're going to be asking, but why? I've grown up with this. This is like breathing. Why is breathing bad? If we are able to inform them rationally, they are going to be much more likely to make those decisions themselves. Much, much, much more likely. It's the same for all of us. We wouldn't like it if somebody arbitrarily told us, you need to stop breathing, it's really bad for you. And we'd be like, I don't think so. Give me some science, give me some data. I mean, that's an interesting topic to pick in the time of COVID. But, you know, we get the idea. Being active users, not passive consumers. So this is another one. If you are informed, we can make informed choices. We can take the step towards being active users, not passive consumers, i.e. not just having a social media account because everybody has one, not engaging in that game just because everybody is playing it. We need to give them reasons to have a broader perspective on why they are doing what they're doing and what they are doing. Putting screens and entertainment in the wider context of our lives, putting the phone, for example, in the context of our lives and not our lives in the context of our phone. Technology, as we said, is here to stay. It is part of our lives. It doesn't need to dominate. It doesn't need to be a point of conflict and contention within our families and our households. Lastly, we need to build on the positive, always reframe in the positive. It is far more powerful than teaching and parenting from the negative. How are we going to do this? Well, we click through to the next slide. Holding this idea in our minds, which we addressed slightly earlier, if you were present in the earlier talk, family legacy, what we have inherited from our own families and what we are passing on to our young people. This idea, how does technology sit in our family legacy? How are we teaching our young people to take into account, to use, to flourish with technology? Family culture. What is our family culture regarding technology? We asked the boys, and we asked a few of you as well, do you have rules, a family household set of rules about regarding screens, for example? And somebody responded, thank you to whoever responded, yes, there are absolutely no phones at the dinner table. That's very helpful. At mealtimes, there are no phones, nobody. Somebody else very honestly commented that, yes, we have rules, but we break them all the time. I think many of us could sympathize with that. And, you know, well, welcome to the human race, I suppose, but we're going to go through a few practical ideas. But just think about this. Are you aware of what your family culture is regarding technology? If you're not, then it's a really good idea to talk about it. Chiricandia suggested, you know, a really good thing to do is go out for dinner tomorrow night before 10 p.m., which is when the restaurants close. You know, go for dinner and talk about this. Talk about, well, what is our family culture? What are we trying to teach our kids as regards technology? This leads us on to a question which does kind of sit within this. If we could click through to the next slide. A question that we get asked a lot, and I think we all debate a lot: when should I Or should I give my child a smartphone? Well, within your family culture, within your family legacy, you have to answer that question. I think, generally speaking, you have to first ask another question. What are you giving it to them for? So we spent a lot of time in the workshop asking the boys, you tell me honestly and personally, what are you using it for? Being an active participator, an active user, and not being a passive consumer means questioning why you are doing the things that you're doing. What are they for? If there is no purpose to giving your child a smartphone other than the fact that they wanted one, maybe you want to look at that, because probably that doesn't sit very well in the family culture that you want to build. If you are giving your child a smartphone because they want to become an app developer in the future, great. But that will already suggest a few guidelines around why, when, and how they can have the smartphone, possibly not all the time. It won't be theirs. It's going to be a tool for them, and therefore will be kept in a public area, etc., etc., etc. In general, I would say they have to show signs of good impulse control, of openness with their toys and their tools. I would say that they have to have a basic level of maturity and giving a really good reason why they should have a smartphone. And it shouldn't just be socially based because everybody's got one. There should be a more solid reason than that. Again, we are trying to reframe it for them, trying to show them that this is not just something to, like an extra limb to attach to your body that has no impact on you. It has a massive impact on everybody, and therefore should be looked at in the right context. You should have it for the right reason. So I know that the Cedars is a no phone zone. There are no smartphones being brought to school, and I'm a big advocate of that. I think really the transition to secondary school shouldn't be marked by a smartphone. If necessary, a brick phone. Nokia 3310, the stable, the traditional. So what does it do? Oh, you can play Snake on it. That's quite fun. But it receives calls and texts, and that's pretty much all you might need as a tool for the first couple of years of secondary school. After that, have a discussion about it. Have a discussion about it within your family. Going forward in practical terms, nurturing a digitally wise generation together as a family. Number one, cultivate an attitude of togetherness. So I think when we were talking to students about, well, have you had disagreements within your family in the last 2 weeks about screen time? 30% of them said yes. And I think the couple of responses to the survey that we sent to you parents, 50% said yes, 50% said no. So I think this is quite a common pattern. I would expect there to be some kind of discussion over screen time at some point in your households. But let's try and do it together, not just an imposition of rules. Again, Chira was talking about kind of authoritarian, controlling parenting. When we are afraid for the safety and well-being of our children, that's what happens. Our instant parent response is triggered, and sometimes we come in too hard. We start imposing rules that to them seem arbitrary, especially when we don't give reasons for it. So one of a good way to kind of stop that from happening is to do things together, to talk. So let them also contribute to earning their devices. Go 50-50. Do not give them a smartphone for their birthday. Give them half of the cost of a smartphone for their birthday, and tell them, okay, listen, here's a list of jobs that you could do within the household. We used to do ironing in my household when I was growing up. It used to be a couple of quid for like a basket of clean laundry. And that's how I earn my train fare to go out with my friends over the weekend. But you can apply this to devices as well. Don't give your children the latest, I don't know what it is. What are they? Xboxes? I don't know. Go 50-50 on it. Give them half of what it costs, because it teaches them a couple of things. One, responsibility. Two, they don't own it completely. And three, when something is something that you have earned, and when something is a gift, you treat those things completely differently. So let them contribute to earning their devices, particularly the ones that are for entertainment, particularly the ones. They also have to do research. They might have to do research about the best entertainment module for them, and you can be with them on that. I think, gaming in itself is not a terrible thing. I think it can really bring families together. And in point number 3 on that slide, have family game time, have sibling game time scheduled in the week. This is when we're going to go to town on Mario Brothers, on, I don't know, a racing game, but all of your siblings together, the family together. Let your young people teach you how to play the games that they play. It's a really fun and simple way to get into their world, to see why it's so engaging and so addictive, but also they will see that you are willing to be on the same level as them. Now, you know, some of you may have done that in the lockdown out of sheer desperation. I don't know, but I would really encourage that going forward. Regular family screen time. It could be a family movie night. In my house growing up, it was Friday night was family movie night, or sometimes Sunday night. You know, that do things together as much as possible. Let them invite you into their world. Discuss and agree your family screen time rules and limits, which parents and children will follow. This is so important. Jenny Price was talking this morning about modeling. If we want our children to act and behave and be a certain way, we must model that ourselves. We can't be hypocritical. When you're a child, when you're a young person, especially in regards to authority, you see the injustices and it really rankles. It really sits with you. And technology can unfortunately be one of these ones where they are perceiving that we're being unfair and arbitrary. And again, I think Jenny mentioned in our technology workshop, I asked the students whether they thought their parents spent a lot of time on their screens. And this young man piped up that, yeah, my mom's addicted to PowerPoint. And I said, she might not be addicted to it. She might be genuinely working. But this was what sat with him, that he had been told to get off his phone. And she assumed that he was wasting time on his phone, but she wasn't giving him attention either. She was on a screen as well. So discuss and agree all together what your family screen time rules are. For example, we all put our phones away at meal time so we can pay full attention to each other. A really easy way to do this, a basket for phones that is in the dining room or in the kitchen. Just get into the habit of chucking your phone in there before every family mealtime. I used to do this with students who were studying when we ran a study club, that the study was a no phone zone. And it was like drawing blood from a stone in the beginning. It was really, my goodness, the excuses that came out of those girls were unbelievable. I don't have my phone today. I don't have a phone. Yes, indeed. And that rectangular kind of lump in your pocket is, don't know what that is, hand it over. And, eventually they get used to it. It's a good sign to see, can they let go of their phones? Can I let go of my phone? It's not easy. It is not easy. But if we are all in this as a family together, we can share those experiences together, like, oh, that's my phone vibrating, and all the kids are like, no, Dad, you're not allowed. You can really bond over those experiences. Be open about the limits of your web filters. Make sure you have a family web filter on your Wi-Fi. When something triggers the web filter, talk about it. Don't interrogate. Don't demand. Simply take your child aside and ask why they searched that phrase. This is something I didn't mention earlier, but when our young people are being drawn into the world of social media, into the world of games, we have to ask ourselves why. Why are they're so interested in this? And it's not just the algorithm. Why are they choosing to be in the digital world rather than in the world of family, of friends, of kind of external life? We have to ask why, because we need to see their reasons and their point of view. And that way they also feel listened to, and our lessons and our advice are going to fall on much richer ground that way. If we click through to the next slide, this leads us on to point number 2. Encourage and facilitate balanced alternatives for their screen time. We have to give them a bigger reason for coming away from their screens, ourselves as well, I should say. So this is why I think it's wonderful that schools like the Cedars have so many things on offer: sports clubs, school clubs, extracurriculars. They have everything, all of these things in front of them that they can engage with, and should encourage them to do that. It doesn't have to be necessarily in school. If there are youth clubs around, if they want to engage in a competitive sport, if they want to join a local art club, things like this, give them a reason to do so. And if you find, I think somebody asked earlier, what if they have no hobbies? Give them the doorway to do that. There are so many opportunities out there. Give your child a research project over the weekend. Okay, listen, you're going to discover something that you really, really want to do. Right, go on YouTube and literally YouTube hobbies and see what comes up, see what you like, and then let's look into facilitating the hobby. In family conversations, I call them family councils, let everybody in the family feedback about things to do as a family, places to go, things to do, when and where possible. Again, these are things that you, as parents and adults in their life, you will need to do this according to your family. There's not going to be a one size fits all. What's going to be helpful for one family isn't going to fit another family. So that's where you, who are captains of your family ship, have a real power and a real responsibility. I just say that family time should be as regular as possible. And maybe that's only once a week, like Sunday is family day, or Friday is family outing day, or I don't know, one mealtime a day is always going to be the family mealtime. And nobody infringes that rule unless there's a big reason why. But within those conversations, let every member of the family, especially the children, talk about what they would like to do and put it all on the table. Encourage creative projects and skills, even though this might sometimes involve screen time. So this goes back to the positivity of screen time. There are many wonderful, wonderful things that young people are able to do that require a screen. I mean, there's going to be balance that they need to build in there, but you know, the next coders of this world, the music tech experts who are already mixing tracks on their phones, you know, if they have those enthusiasms, encourage them, talk to them about them, and then help them to strike a balance in their life, because it's not all bad. Some of it is incredible and really very, very good. The next slide, talk. We've talked about this before, and this is a running theme, talk. Now, when we have conversations with our young people about technology, we have to be prepared to go in with a positive mindset. So reframe your language. Talk about we instead of you and I. Talk about what do you think of rather than you shouldn't. Let's do this instead of you shouldn't do that. It really changes the way that our message lands. We don't mean to say, I think your way of doing things is terrible and you need to change. But sometimes that's how the emotional message lands, especially with something as close to them as technology, as social media, as gaming, etc. So, for example, instead of saying, get off your phone, you've been wasting time on it for too long, that is immediately a very negative way of doing things. And the instant reaction of any self-respecting teenager is going to be like, why are you telling me what to do with my life? You don't want to escalate into that situation. Go back to your family agreement, go back to your family contract, just a reminder. You know, so-and-so, didn't we agree that, da, 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 da? So what would you like to do now? You know, just quite gentle, really clear and focused, and doesn't become aggressive, because it doesn't need to be aggressive. And in fact, we won't get very many results being aggressive. Keep your basic household rules and limits clear and fair, applicable to all members of the family, including parents. Allow them to be and to feel included in this process of agreeing what our family agreement is regarding screen time. Listen respectfully to their feedback. Now, I didn't mention it here, but punishments, sanctions for when somebody breaks the screen time rule, if they answer a message at the table, if they sit in the car with their earphones in, if they game for far too long and they've gone past their bedtime. I think Chiro mentioned it before. Let them suggest what the punishments are. He gave some practical suggestions, but let them suggest what the punishments are. But let them suggest what the punishments are for you as well. Because we, as we have already looked at, we break the rules ourselves. We have our phones glued to our hands all the time. And we need to model this good behavior for them. So let's be ready to be under the law of our children as they are under the law of us. And again, it's just a really bonding experience. And maybe if you and a child have somehow broken the same rule within the same week, maybe that means, oh no, okay, buddy, you and I are doing the rubbish this week, or we're doing the washing up this week, or come on. And then that means it's bonding time together as well. There are so many opportunities for positivity around this within your family. Give good reasons for limits and rules. If there is a Wi-Fi cutoff point, which I think there should be, by the way, in every household, a Wi-Fi cutoff point, why they won't get a smartphone until they're whatever age, or why you will not allow them to play a certain game, don't impose the limit and rule. Talk about it. Talk about it and listen to what they have to say. Ultimately, the decision is going to be yours. But I think we will learn an awful lot by conversing with our young people and hearing what they have to say, why they want to do this certain thing. Because it might be that their need to play Fortnite at 1 o'clock in the morning is not so much a need to play Fortnite at 1 o'clock in the morning, but the fact that their friends are doing that. And actually, they feel really self-conscious about the fact that they're not doing that. That is a much more fruitful discussion to have than the, you should be playing Fortnite at 1 o'clock in the morning. There are often, we have to ask why. There are often so many underlying issues which we would want to be a part of. And they are much more high quality conversations than the, you shouldn't be doing this kind of conversations. Finally, take an interest in what interests them. Encourage them to talk openly about their screen-based enthusiasms as well as their other enjoyments. Talk, just talk. And I think, every technological conversation shouldn't be a negative one, should not be a negative one, can be a positive one, and should be. It takes a shifting of a mindset and it takes a shifting of perspective. But I think if we come at it from this angle, we have a good chance of creating a legacy that they are then able to pass on to their own children, that we are nurturing a generation that it has their eyes open about their digital lives, that they have self-regulation, self-mastery, and they learned it from you in their families. And ultimately, that is what we want. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you very, very much. If there are any questions, if you could put them in the Q&A. Waiting. Ooh, how to help boys and girls versus head onto addiction. How to help boys and girls differently according to addiction? Well, I think the basic principles are probably going to be the same. The basic foundational principles we've been talking about is talking to them, asking why. I think it also depends what they are addicted to and why. The most important reason is why they would have latched onto that in the first place. So boys, it's much more common for them to be addicted to games, to the fast moving, fast action. Probably their friends are really involved in it as well. How to help them out of it is, again, to provide alternatives for them that are just as engaging. It's difficult. You will have to expect that there will be a weaning process where it's like withdrawal symptoms, where they will do everything within their power to get back at that video game. Sometimes it might have to be a cold turkey approach, but you have to talk to them about it first. You have to have a conversation of, listen, do you realize how negative this is becoming? Look at how you're affecting other people. Tell me again about what you learned about addiction. How do you think you are, how it's affecting you right now? Are you able to just turn this off and walk away? And if not, let's do something about it. What do you suggest? So the cold turkey method might be simply that the console is taken away with their agreement, and you fill their time with something else. In our family, my dad had this great idea that we had a bonfire pit in our back garden. And I know not everybody has access to a garden or that kind of space, but you could replace it with a similar thing, going for walks, going fishing, as Jenny suggested this morning. Something very hands-on and very engaging for the whole mind, so that you forget completely about what you're leaving behind. The reasoning behind my dad's bonfire pit was that we could invite our friends around and we were engaging with them. We were with them and having a good time while trying to build a bonfire. The result is I can now build a really good bonfire, but while we went along, it was a very absorbing process. So that's one thing that I would suggest for both boys and girls. Now, about girls, I think we are due to give the same sort of sessions in the Laurels. And for girls, it's a slightly different thing. Their addiction tends to be socially based. It tends to be an addiction to social media and deeply tied up with self-esteem, with perceptions of other people, because girls develop their social senses, their social sensitivities a lot earlier than boys. And with the sudden influx of social media, which gives them far too many options and doorways and ways of looking at the world and themselves, that addiction is a very different type. So again, it's going to begin with conversation. It is going to begin with, how does this make you feel and why? How do you think is it affecting you? And once the girl in question has come to a kind of rational conclusion about it, and it might take some time, then again, maybe the cold turkey approach is going to be helpful for her. Deleting the social media app. You would be surprised how many young people have already done that. I've come across a lot of them. During exam time, they will just, that's it, they delete it off their phones. There are apps that lock certain apps for you and will not let you back on again until your specified date and time. So maybe help them with that. But again, there is something deeper. Often the addiction to the social media is symptomatic of something else. So maybe you are going to need to have, over time, deeper conversations with her about her self-esteem, about her body image, about how she can make those into more positive things. Again, I think that's a session on itself.